Well, what's the broader situation for Australia going forward once we're beyond this crisis? How could we be better prepared? I'm joined now by Stuart, Ellis, CEO of the Australasian Fire and Emergency Services Authorities Council. Stuart, thanks very much for your time today. Why don't we start with some of the broad talk, I guess, about this current fire situation. November certainly isn't rare to have fires. The big situation this time around has been a lack of time for hazard reduction. And that is something perhaps we'll have to get used to. Not as much time when things are stable and cool enough to get rid of the fuel.
No, absolutely. That's always a challenge for us, and we do a lot of that hazard reduction in autumn, historically. But of course, as the fire seasons extend, that opportunity reduces. And it is very, very determined on the conditions. So it's not just straight timing thing, it's an issue around moisture and ensuring it's safe to do so. So certainly the opportunities for spring hazard reduction haven't presented themselves this year.
So there's that aspect. Obviously there's a warmer climate, slightly warmer at the moment, but that essentially increases the number of days per year where we're going to have these volatile conditions, and depending on where you are in the country, and this data is a little bit less reliable, a little bit less rainfall for the south and southwest as well. That's what we're coming up with in the next few decades?
Well, that's certainly what the science is telling us, and that has an impact on the veracity of fires, the length of the fire season. I think the other issue we're facing right now in this current campaign of fires is it's been relentless really for 2 months. I mean, we've been fighting fires in northern New South Wales and southern Queensland for 2 months with very little let up, and of course that's involving thousands of firefighters rotating in the fire ground, and it's leading to a national effort where we are bringing resources from around the country to assist. Because local volunteers, they're particularly in drought-affected areas, they can't leave their properties, they're feeding their stock. So it has a sort of flow-on effect.
So, okay, when we're talking about future years and being prepared, we've assessed what the conditions are going to be. What do you think needs to be looked at? It seems like we're pretty good at fighting fires. There's a lot of experience, and I think it was extraordinary, the lack of property yesterday destroyed, and certainly the complete lack of fatalities. But what should we be focusing more on in the next few decades? What do we need to change?
Look, I think it's got to become a broader effort by everyone, a shared responsibility. It can't, the effort can't be carried just by fire and emergency services, but communities who, as you said yesterday, did a fantastic effort in New South Wales, engaging with the messaging, listening to the warnings. And so that was a big part of ensuring there weren't additional fire starts. But it's a community effort, it's a government effort at all levels. Part of it, probably a very significant part, is from a local government perspective where they approve building approvals. Because the more we build in bushland and hinterland, then that raises the risk in these fire events of those residents losing their homes or worse.
Right, so there's an issue with just spreading out, is there? Because obviously there's no discrimination at the moment. If there's a property under threat, firefighters will try to save it. You're saying that by building in some of these more remote areas, we might be stretching our resources. We should stick to going, here's a population centre, this is where you build, and that way the firefighting effort is easier?
Well, local government already has a role in approving building applications. From a firefighting perspective, what we're saying is the more building we do in bushland areas, then that increases the risk. I mean, it's just it's a fantastic environment to live in when all things are going well, but it becomes a high risk environment in our current conditions. And so that leads us to say residents and community need to take greater responsibility during these times, because it's been a pretty consistent message for many years. Fire and emergency services can't be, at every house. Certainly in these current conditions.
So I was just going to ask, there's been talk politically this week of, well, who's to blame? Is it councils around hazard reduction? What's the process around that hazard reduction? Is there any evidence that councils are blocking what state governments and departments want to do when it comes to hazard reduction?
Look, I think the biggest issue with hazard reduction is ensuring there are the available number of days. Firefighters are heroes when they're putting out a fire. They are villains when they light a fire and it gets out of control. And so there's a lot of risk measures in place. It's a high resource activity, conducting prescribed burns. There's a lot of planning put in place, often years ahead, as to when suitable areas are to be burnt. But at the end of the day, it's reliant on having the safe conditions to do so. And so, that's... And right. In the last 12 months, for instance, there haven't been a lot of days. Often in a year there may be only 10 or 20 days a year in particular areas where it's safe to do so. And then you've got to make sure you've got the planning, the resources in place to conduct that burn on that day.
Stuart, just finally and briefly, what about aircraft? Do we have enough in Australia? I know they're a last resort, but you can see they're very effective sometimes when a fire is out of control.
Yeah, look, they certainly are. Our assessment is we do. We've got more large air tankers coming into the country this year than we've ever had before. There'll be a total of 7 by we get to December. But just local aircraft, we're drawing currently on about 90 aircraft in New South Wales, over 40 in Queensland. We've got very good systems in place with local aircraft industry to provide that support. And so, as you say, they're a tool. Aircraft don't put out fires. They're a tremendous aid to assist us, but we still need firefighters on the ground. Of course, in a lot of these conditions, as we found out this afternoon, as the conditions get worse, the opportunity to use these aircraft is limited and indeed becomes dangerous. So that's a factor we've got to consider as well.
Indeed, with the ferocity of some of these blazes in particular. Stuart, Ellis, appreciate your thoughts today. Thank you.
Thanks very much.